Good morning, good afternoon, good night, wherever you are. I'm Terrence with LoWi Consulting, and you are seeing a test on my LiveStation, which is essentially a super micro server box with the AMD Ryzen 7 5700G processor. Trying to see how it works, whether overheating is a thing that I have to worry about when I'm live streaming, certainly on 3400 kilobits per second. This was an issue for my prior builds. It seems to draw from the CPU a lot. Now on my MacBook Pro, which is what I typically use for live streaming, I would normally get CPU usage up to 30 something percent, and on top of that they would tell me, oh, there are some low frame rates, low drop rates. It would just be insane. So right now, this is on BoxCast, which is allowing me to stream in 1080p. And the good thing about this setup is that it is on live stream, or should I say, this is being live streamed. I'm not doing any recordings on here. And so far, CPU usage is at 2.5%. So what I want to see is if I could live stream a still image and have that stream going without a huge spike in CPU temperature. Speaking of CPU temperature, let me go to this. Or actually, let me close out of here. We'll go to this now. CPU temperature right now is at 74 degrees Celsius, which is, in my opinion, not that great. But given the fact that there's not a lot of activity, it is kind of a stationary system here. It's doing its thing. So now I want to see what happens when I move my unit around. So here we go, seeing CPU temps of 75, so it has gone up. I'm just gonna do maybe the wall, my little Ethernet cable there, some stuff that I gotta clean out. This is really the bat cave as far as I can tell. I just quickly got it to the ceiling, so there really is no connection there. Just gonna move it around to my daughter's belts there, and I'll bring it back. So we've been recording at relatively 33,000 to 3,600 kilobits a second. So swinging it back around, back and forth, and CPU has reached up to 79 degrees Celsius, now at 78 degrees Celsius. Certainly that is the most it has ever reached, and now it's time to look at dropped frames. And I'm sorry if you can't see it, but it looks like we've had no dropped frames. Now this is incredible because this is really on a Wi-Fi connection to Verizon Fios, which is kind of at the gigabit Ethernet speed. So maybe because it's on that wireless Ethernet bit, that's probably why I'm not seeing any dropped frames or anything like that. It's still a little weird to me. I should anticipate way more, but here we are. Returning back to the temperatures, CPU temps 77 degrees Celsius, which means I could basically fry an egg in there for live streaming. And I understand that it's Ryzen APU, because with the 5700G it comes with the Radeon graphics, I think the Vega chip, which might be considered antiquated for the purposes of APUs, but still effective. You know, this is primarily for a streaming device, so this is not going to be for gaming. This is not really going to be for, you know, watching movies on here. It'll be for recording movies and then storing them, where I transfer it to another computer for editing, or however I choose to do it. But yeah, I want the system primarily so that I don't have to drag around a laptop. Even though the laptop will be thinner, it certainly certainly will not be as powerful, because right now we're dealing with a heck of a beast in the system. But underneath this bar that I created, and inside the server here, is the Elgato HD60 Plus. This allows me to capture at 1080p, and it is an input here through an HDMI wire, which is connected to one of these Nutric D series type connectors, and it is this HDMI cable that is connected to the Sony, which allows me to be able to stream this the way I am right now. And in addition to that, I have the ATEM MPISO, which is the Mini Pro ISO. I just shortened it to MPISO. And then the Stream Deck, which is offline. Not using that currently, but just giving you guys an idea, or giving myself an idea. And for the screen, inspired by Monte Weaver, I actually went ahead and found on Amazon this 13.3 inch 2K portable monitor. I'll zoom in to give you guys a little bit of a perspective there. Name of the brand is Arzopa. There are a couple of brands that you can choose from, but this one is 2K, which is essentially 2560 by 1600 resolution. So it's greater resolution, which is funny because when I just plugged it in as plug and play, it gave me the maximum resolution, but text size is at 200%. So if I were to meddle around with the controls a little bit more, yep, 2560 by 1600 at 200. I actually reduced it to 1080p with text at 150% so that it could accomplish what I want to. I like the screen quality, is basically what I want to say from this. And what I would like to see is a 3D print sort of a mount where I could have both this. Let me zoom out a bit for perspective purposes. So I can have this, I can have the MPISO, and the Stream Deck all in one, and it would probably be sitting up here. The slide-in draw is pretty good, but I don't know. I just don't know. The overall unit that this thing is housed in is an SKB 4U rack system. It comes with sort of side handles, panels that protect the back and the front. You have wheels so you can roll it around, a handle that pulls out. It's really cool. I liked it for the time that I'm using it up till present, but as you can tell, it's plastic, and what's happening is after a while it's starting to warp. So as you are making modifications to the unit, it's not standing as firm or as in place as it once did. Like I had bought this was the very last thing I bought, this slide out rack, and it never used to brush against the unit like it's doing now. But that could be just a problem that I have. Maybe if I just move this panel over there, then that'll be fine. Speaking of, what is this panel? This panel here is the 80J power USB rack. This is a outlets that allows me to have 8 controls and 2 that are always on, one in the front and one in the back, and it will pull out through this power wire here, which is actually connected to an outlet and is provided power that way. Now typically what I do when I'm on the road is I would have a backup battery. The name brand of the battery is a Jackery. I think it's called Jackery 500. Right now it's in my automobile. That way I'm not worrying about it. I just grab this and go. What else do I want to talk about? The MixMate 3 allows me 2 XLR mic connections, and then I can control the gain and tone for those mic connections. I also have some level inputs for not the RCA type, but is it the RCA type, or is it just the 1/4-inch microphone connections? I believe it's the 1/4-inch. I don't really mess with those as much as the XLRs. Ultimately, what I would like to do is either one, get a wireless setup, which would connect to the Mixmate, which would connect to my server here, or two, I would get a wireless setup which connects to the ATEM, and that's it. Typically, when I run controls from this server here, which includes the HD60 from Elgato, I'm running the mic straight from the recording source. So whatever camera or camcorder I'm using, the microphone that's built into it is the audio that I'm picking up. Right, wrong, or indifferent. But in any event, this is kind of how the setup is run. In the back, as you saw, are the Nutric D-Series type connectors that I've been using. The only thing set up are the HDMIs. I have Ethernet, which, let me see if I can show it to you. It's kind of all the way back there. It's a little mini router which I use to connect the Ethernet, and from that router I could plug into both the server and to the ATEM MPISO. I may change that though. I just might very well change that. I don't know if that's something I'm gonna go forth and do, but yeah, I just might. I don't know. Ideally, what I would like to see is I bring this thing on the road, is that I end up changing this from a 4U to a 3U, because technically speaking, all of these things, the MPISO, the Stream Deck, and perhaps the router, will all be up here, because I'm not using this for a laptop. You might be wondering, well, how come I have all this real estate and I'm not using it for a laptop? The problem I'm having is, after a while, this surface here, those little pieces that hold and secure the laptop in place, they don't stick on properly. And as a result of them not sticking on properly, there are times I will lift up the case and the MacBook Pro will slide towards me. And if I'm not paying attention, it'll slide right off. So I was like, yeah, this is not good anymore. It served its purpose. Maybe I can find Velcro that'll do the job a little more effectively. But until then, this is just a nice felt top, which allows me to rest certain things on. That's how I'm going to work that, I think. I'm not going to stress that too much. I guess the question I'm going to have is, do I want a secondary 12-inch or 13-inch screen next to this one, which would allow me to observe the ATEM MPISO? Because right now, while this is on, there is no connections to it. So it's not, the only thing I believe that's connected is directly to the server. It's not really connected to the monitor. It's not connected to HDMI inputs or anything. So I'm trying to figure out, do I want the same screen size? Do I want a smaller screen size? Questions. But ultimately, a 3U server will eliminate this entire shelf here, and it'll just be these 3 panels. The also thing I need to make sure of is I return back to the monitoring of the temps. So see, the temp right now is 80 Celsius. I'm not used to things being at 80 Celsius, to be honest with you. I'm used to more of the 50, 60 degree areas. But I also have to bear in mind that this is not just the CPU, this is the CPU and the GPU all in one. And it's going to use that energy because of what's being outputted here. If I just, minimized this screen, so it's only showing just this here, the temp might potentially drop. Because again, the focus on this camera is just what's on the main screen, and there's not a lot of moving parts. So it dropped by 1 degree Celsius, so now it's 79 degrees. Still not bad, but still not good. Now you're probably wondering, you know, how is this being cooled? Well, the APU has the Noctua, I believe it's the cooling unit in black, if I'm not mistaken, as it dropped down another degree. It's a Noctua fan, but without the fan. If I had put the fan here, it would be too big and I wouldn't be able to fit in the 1U rack. And unfortunately, they don't make 2U racks 13 inches, which would allow me to use this as a rack and still be able to, you know, mount cooling fans and so forth. And see, now it's at 77 degrees Celsius. So I'm still streaming live. I am only looking at the monitor of the temperature, and because the image is stagnant, it's not really doing anything. So there you have it, guys. And for that brief moment in time, I guess there was a glitch there, but temperature went down 77 degrees Celsius. So my hope is that it maintains these temperatures. It doesn't really go to the 90s, because if it does, that means I will definitely have to reconsider using this server. And still trying to remember what is cooling this unit besides that Noctua CPU cooler without the fan. So I have two smaller Noctua fans that are basically in front here, pushing the air out this way. And they're probably working overtime, but you're not hearing any of them because those Noctua fans are very, very silent. This, by the way, is connected through PCIe into the server, the Elgato HD60. This, however, would be connected through USB 3 or USB-C into the server itself. This might pack a better punch and actually might help the CPU cool off better. So I have to see and test it with the connection and see how it fares. That actually might not be a bad idea. So I'll tell you what, I'm going to switch the cameras out, and I'm going to have a camera run from the ATEM MPISO instead of using it through the Elgato HD60. So right now I'm connected to the ATEM MPISO, which is this guy right here. You're like, what is the MPISO? ATEM Mini Pro ISO. It's connected through the HDMI 1 to my Sony camcorder, and hopefully this is broadcasting live. It's a still image. You know, you're not seeing a lot of movement or activity. This is again just to test, you know, where the temps go if I were to use this system the way it is right now. And now it has reached 85 degrees Celsius. This is the highest it has ever been. We're here through OBS. I can see OBS. You don't really need to see me looking at OBS, so I'm going to minimize this here. And now we're going to see, now it's at 86 Celsius, and that's with a little bit of activity that you saw on the camcorder. So now the question is, with the only focus being this window here of the monitor of what's going on, what are the temps looking like? I guess with the USB-C connection, because this is connected to USB-C into the server versus the PCI slot, which was the primary use for the Elgato HD60 Plus. Temps have indeed reached up to 85, 86 degrees. That's the max that this thing has seen since we started this whole setup, which is, I mean, for me it's not ideal, because at any time it could reach 90 degrees and it'll be a problem. So what this is telling me is I should slowly consider the process of utilizing a different box to house all this, at least allow me to use the fan in the Noctua CPU cooler instead of just that ridged piece that sits on top of the CPU, and hopefully that'll bring the temperatures down some, because 86 is still very high. And then I'll probably have to worry about re-putting the thermal paste, and maybe I'll still use the fans that the Noctua fans that are in here. It'll just be a different box. Now you're probably looking at this thing and going, well, it's about maybe 15, 16 inches in depth from here to the back, is everything that big? Well, the answer in short is no, and I'll show you what I mean. So this is the back of the unit here, right? The server probably extends 13 inches, so there's 2 inches between the back of the server and the back of the rail, right? Everything else is further in. Both the rack bar and the rolls Mixmate 3 are very, very short in depth, which means they're barely taking half the depth of this unit. So if anything, I could have a 2U unit, which is tall, but still will encompass the space necessary and accomplish the goal. So maybe I just have a very compact, I guess, video game console size CPU or CPU case, which will properly fan everything. But while I'm out here, this is the little mini router that I have set up, and these two connections are basically for the Supermicro unit and the ATEM MPISO, and that's how the Ethernet connection from here, whether it's through Wi-Fi or through bonding or through the regular ground Ethernet, will be connected. 2 USBs that will connect to the server, and the HDMI inputs for the MPISO. This was the HDMI input for the Elgato HD60 Plus. These two I'm going to probably proportion out as external monitor ports. So instead of it going routed through the top here, I'll have it routed through these guys. Something to think about. And then the XLR on those ends. And that's how I'm wiring this. As you can tell, it's kind of an open back because I wasn't really using it for much. So I'm hoping that a 3U rack will allow me to space all this out properly and still accomplish the goal. And I can just have the monitors, the MPISOs, and everything else set up that way. And again, I love the fact that I'm able to pull this out and lug it anywhere I need to go, but after a while, it loses its effectiveness. It's not as effective as it once was. So Temps still reading 86 degrees, and that's just using the MPISO as opposed to the unit. Don't know. Guess my Manfrotto Be Free wants to be free. So anyways, this was just a quick vid. I'm going to call it a night. Gotta get some hauls and soothe this throat. It's about 2:30 in the morning Eastern Standard, so I just wanted to do this just so I have a catalog of what's going on, and I can sort of hold myself accountable a month or two from now to make sure that this setup gets better. And typically I only bust this out for the bigger jobs. Smaller jobs, usually the laptop and the camera that's rolling right now, but I really want to use this more often, even if I don't use this particular server. So right now it's at 85 Celsius. 85 Celsius and running on the MPISO. So that's crazy to me. But as you can see, I've been recording at 3,400 kilobits a second and not a drop in frame rate. CPU usage is only now at less than 5% at 30 frames a second. I don't really stream beyond 30 frames per second because at that point, it's going to be sent to the BoxCast team, and they're basically redoing the stream at a lower frame rate so that everybody can watch it. And typical frame rates for 1080p screens as of today, this may change in the future, are 30 frames a second, 24 if you're using the PAL system like in UK and so forth. So this is really, it's a positive and it's a negative, because I know that this unit will allow me to record or at least stream 1080p and get better frame rates than when I was using the MacBook Pro, And the MacBook Pro only has 16 gigs of RAM, but it's an Intel processor and not a lot of hard space or hard drive space to work with. Here it's kind of like an open book. So hopefully this transcends into the real world, and it is going to get better. I just got to figure out how I'm going to deal with the overheating issues, because going back here, 87 now, it has reached 89 degrees Celsius, is not cool with me at all. I don't think it's ever been cool. And the CPU fans are running at 5,000 RPMs, 5,100, 5,300 max for the fans that are connected. And it's two fans, two 10-meter fans, so they're pumping up and they're doing their best to keep the fans going. But with this system in the closed environment, it's not going to do it. Anyway, that's the video. I'm going to stop streaming for now, and I'm just thankful that I finally did this for me. Ultimately, I want to work on my other camera and see if I can get the gimbal to work fully on it. There was a bit of an issue where the gimbal just kept vibrating when I put my Sony camera in there, but I'm going to see if with this weight that I add on to it, this counterweight, it's going to do the job. And I'll probably record that, progress of how to set it up and what I did, and maybe it'll work for me at that point. But anyway, I'm signing off for the night. Hope you guys have a fantastic evening, and yeah, man, peace out.